Hello, my name is Anton Shekhovtsov and I'm the chair of the Center for Democratic Integrity in Austria. Today we are launching a new video project in cooperation with the Ukrainian platform Analizuy. In these videos I'll be talking about European politics in the context of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. If this sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our new videos. In the first days of the new year, Reuters published a special investigative report titled "Pro-Putin operatives in Germany work to turn Berlin against Ukraine." The report looks at 6 individuals engaged in pushing pro-Kremlin narratives in Germany, including figures who were apparently involved in coordinating a pro-Russian demonstration in Köln in September last year. The authors identified that some of those individuals are associated with the German far right. The others are closely linked to the Russian military forces and malign influence operations, including operations involving some parts of the Russian-speaking community in Germany. The Reuters report is a fascinating investigation, and I highly recommend reading it. You will find a link to the report in the description of this video. However, I would like to draw your attention to a couple of points that I believe the investigation has not elaborated. The investigation notes that 2 individuals involved in various pro-Russian activities in Germany planned to participate in a forum of so-called civil society activists in Moscow in the beginning of December last year. The report also reveals that their tickets were paid by the Berlin-based Russian House, an institution which is part of the Russian federal agency called Rossотрудничество. The authors also add that Rossотрудничество is under the EU sanctions. Some background information. Rossотрудничество was sanctioned by the EU on the 21st of July 2022. The official journal of the EU noted, "For many years, Rossотрудничество has been acting as an umbrella organization for a network of Russian compatriots and agents of influence, and it funds various public diplomacy and propaganda projects, consolidating the activities of pro-Russian players and disseminating the Kremlin's narratives, including historical revisionism." Sanctioning Rossотрудничество implied in particular that the Russian agency would have its economic resources and funds frozen. And yet, almost half a year after it was sanctioned by the EU, the Berlin-based Russian House was somehow able to purchase travel tickets for the agents of Russian malign influence, let alone continue its operations as if nothing happened. How exactly is it possible? One explanation would be that the EU sanctioned the agency registered in Russia, which is true, while the Russian House is an organization legally registered in Germany. But this argument does not hold water, because the Moscow-registered agency is the operator of the Russian House in Berlin, so the sanctions should apply to the German organization too. The real explanation is much simpler. Germany, or more specifically the federal state of Berlin, simply does not enforce the EU's sanctions against Rossотрудничество. And this against the background of Russia's ongoing genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Of course, as many other Russian state-controlled structures, Rossотрудничество is hardly an efficient tool of Russian influence in Europe. For this we must thank Russian domestic corruption. But I find the unwillingness of the Berlin authorities to comply with the EU decisions much more problematic than the actual functioning of the Russian House in Germany. But before I offer you my interpretation of the strange, to say the least, behavior of the Berlin authorities, let me point to yet another important bit in the Reuters report. As the authors were working on their investigation, they reached out to the German government with detailed questions. The government did not respond to the authors, but the German Interior Ministry said that it took very seriously any attempts by foreign states or individuals to exert influence. Obviously, we can easily challenge this statement by pointing out that the Russian House, the major state-controlled operator of Russian malign influence in Germany, is still operational despite the EU sanctions. But let's set aside this for a moment and take note that the response of the German Interior Ministry referred to foreign states or individuals attempting to exert influence in the country. Now, it's actually impossible to imagine Russian operators of political warfare in Europe functioning without help from local actors. Moreover, these are local enablers of Russian malign influence who are in general much more valuable than Russian actors. And yet, there is immense resistance on the part of the authorities in the EU, not only in Germany, to hold local assets, enablers and facilitators accountable for advancing Russian tactical and sometimes even strategic goals in Europe. This results not only in a high degree of infiltration of European public and private sectors by the Russian actors, but also in a relatively high degree of comfort and safety that European facilitators of Russian malign influence enjoy. Why? Because in many cases it is politically expensive for national authorities to investigate elements of political, economic, academic, cultural establishment in their own country. The higher the position they hold, the deeper integrated they are in the entire system, the more people will fall if they fall. Let me give you an example from Austria. In 2019, a dramatic political scandal rocked the country. Two leaders of the far-right Freedom Party were shown on a secretly recorded video from 2017 discussing shady deals with a woman who presented herself as a rich niece of a Russian oligarch. At the time of the scandal, one of those politicians, Heinz Christian Strache, was a vice-chancellor of Austria in the coalition government with the centre-right People's Party, led by Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. The video captured a sting operation. No niece of a Russian oligarch actually existed, but Vice-Chancellor Strache had to resign from his position in the government. But that was not the end of the political drama. Following the fall of the coalition government of the People's Party and Freedom Party, the Austrian parliament launched the so-called Ibiza committee that would investigate corruption in the fallen government. The investigation eventually led to the resignation of Chancellor Kurz. He had no relation to the Ibiza affair, but the investigation went so far as to uncover the engagement of Kurz and his confidants in other forms of misconduct. Perhaps we could have learned about inappropriate behavior of some other Austrian politicians too. But the Green Party, which formed a coalition government with the People's Party, helpfully refused to vote for an extension of the work period of the Ibiza Committee. The Austrian example clearly shows us how dangerous it is for particular parts of national political elites to dig really deep into corruption allegations. Focusing on Russian actors while disregarding local enablers does little to curtail Russian political warfare and corruption of politicians and officials in Europe. In many cases, the excessive focus on foreign stakeholders is a deliberate trick to draw attention away from bad apples in our own systems. I don't deny the destructive nature of Russian operators of malign activity. However, their efficiency in advancing Russian goals and objectives in Europe predominantly depends on European collaborators who are often protected, and this is the major problem, by the system they belong to. And this is why we have situations like that with the Berlin authorities who are blatantly sabotaging the EU sanctions and don't do anything to close down the Russian house in the German capital. But even more dangerously, we have situations like that in the state of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, where the head of its government colluded with the Russians and went unpunished. Just imagine, the head of a German federal state set up a foundation that was secretly designed to lobby for the Russian Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. The Russians literally ran a major influence operation directly through the office of Minister-President of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. And apart from the criticism in the national and international press, the head of the state got away with it. But I don't want to sound too gloomy and create an impression that Germany is overrun by Russian agents of influence. It's clearly not. Obviously, German enablers of the Kremlin's political warfare do everything they can to hinder the awakening of Germany to the Russian threat. But the country is still going, slowly but steadily, in the right direction. Germany has become more active in busting espionage operations in the country and finally ended its shameful dependence on Russian energy supplies. After the United States, Germany is currently the second largest donor to Ukraine if we calculate bilateral commitments and the country's contribution to the EU support. Germany is also the third largest donor of military aid to Ukraine after the United States and the United Kingdom. Of course, Ukraine is not yet receiving particular types of German armaments that it urgently needs, but even in this problematic area, things are moving in the right direction. And we must also understand that the fact that Germany is supplying heavy armaments to Ukraine is a real political and psychological revolution for the German political establishment. When investing in Ukraine's military victory over the Russian aggressors, Germans are not only putting European values before their vested national interests, they are also admitting that decades of German foreign policy aiming to build relations with Russia on the basis of pragmatism and constructive thinking were a grotesque exercise in self-deception, a lie that has now become unsustainable. One can only hope, and there are grounds for this hope, that we will hear more good news from Germany in the nearest future. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, so do like it and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on the European politics in the context of the Russian aggression against Ukraine.